As Trump's new government reshapes trade laws and rewrites global economic rules, it's crucial to ask, how did America get here? For over 7 decades, after World War II, the U.S. built an intricate web of trade agreements designed to bind nations together through commerce, prevent conflict, and fuel globalization. Tariffs fell, factories moved, and consumers thrived, but beneath the surface, working-class resentment grew. The 10 historic deals we're about to explore reveal how America's grand experiment in free trade rose, flourished, and ultimately fractured, paving the way for Trump's bold new trade revolution. At number 1, we have the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, the landmark 1947 Accord that laid the foundation for the post-war global economic order. Signed on October 30th, 1947, GATT emerged from the devastation of World War II with a mission to rebuild global commerce on principles of openness and cooperation. Initially envisioned as a temporary framework preceding the ambitious International Trade Organization, ITO, GATT unexpectedly became the cornerstone of international trade after the U.S. Congress refused to ratify the ITO Charter. What began as a provisional arrangement quickly evolved into a durable system that guided world trade for nearly 5 decades. The United States, alongside 22 other founding nations, committed to 2 transformative principles: gradual tariff reduction and non-discriminatory trade, known as the Most Favored Nation Clause. By focusing on practical negotiations rather than bureaucratic idealism, GATT facilitated multiple rounds of trade talks, like the Tokyo Round and Uruguay Round, that incrementally dismantled protectionist barriers. When it officially took effect on January 1, 1948, it marked the dawn of an American-led era of liberal economic expansion, fostering a stable environment that enabled unprecedented global growth. Its minimalist yet powerful design made it one of history's most successful trade frameworks, proving that structured cooperation and measured liberalization could sustain decades of prosperity and peace. At number 2, we spotlight the Marrakesh Agreement of 1995, the pivotal treaty that gave birth to the World Trade Organization and redefined how nations engaged in global commerce. Signed on April 15, 1994, and coming into effect on January 1, 1995, this agreement marked the formal evolution of the provisional GATT system into a permanent institutionalized body governing world trade. The WTO represented a dramatic expansion of scope, moving beyond goods to include services and intellectual property, and covered nearly every aspect of trade policy, from subsidies to government procurement. What made the WTO revolutionary was the establishment of a binding dispute settlement body, DSB, a quasi-judicial mechanism that allowed nations to enforce rulings and ensure compliance. For the United States, this was both a triumph and a challenge, an extraordinary leap toward rule-based globalization, but also a perceived loss of trade sovereignty. By the 2010s, criticism mounted as the DSB's power clashed with national politics, culminating in the Trump administration's move to block the appointment of appellate body judges, effectively paralyzing the system. Yet, despite these tensions, the WTO remains the most comprehensive trade governance structure ever built, symbolizing the height of international cooperation and the U.S.'s central role in shaping it. At number 3, we have the U.S.-Israel Free Trade Agreement, a groundbreaking 1985 accord that marked America's first ever bilateral free trade deal and reshaped how the U.S. approached economic diplomacy. Taking effect on September 1, 1985, the ILFTA was not merely an economic arrangement, but a strategic political alliance disguised as trade policy. By eliminating tariffs on industrial goods fully completed by January 1, 1995, the agreement created a seamless commercial bridge between Washington and Tel Aviv while preserving protections for sensitive agricultural sectors. What makes the ILFTA remarkable is its geopolitical intent. At the time, Israel accounted for less than 1% of U.S. trade, meaning the deal was never about profit, it was about partnership. Through this pact, the Reagan administration sought to strengthen a key Middle Eastern ally, demonstrate U.S. commitment to regional stability, and set a new template for future trade agreements. It proved that free trade could be wielded as a powerful diplomatic tool, advancing both economic and security objectives simultaneously. The success of the ILFTA inspired later agreements with nations like Canada, Mexico, and Jordan, embedding trade at the heart of American foreign policy. It was the dawn of an era where economics and geopolitics fused into a single, calculated strategy for global influence. At number 4, we spotlight the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement, the groundbreaking accord that transformed the world's two largest trading partners into a single integrated economic powerhouse. Signed in 1988 and entering into force on January 1, 1989, CUSFA became the blueprint for North American economic integration, laying the groundwork for the creation of NAFTA just a few years later. Its bold objective was to eliminate virtually all trade barriers over a 10-year period, fueling a surge in cross-border commerce and investment. Yet what truly set CUSFA apart was its scope. It didn't stop at reducing tariffs, but delved deep into services, investment, and dispute resolution, establishing a structured rules-based framework that balanced economic competition with fairness. For the first time, Canada and the United States created a mechanism to peacefully resolve trade conflicts, ensuring predictability in a relationship often tested by differing regulations and market practices. The agreement's success demonstrated that two highly advanced economies could harmonize policies without sacrificing sovereignty, proving the viability of deep economic cooperation. Though superseded by NAFTA in 1994, CUSFA's legacy endures as the laboratory for modern trade liberalization, testing the limits of economic diplomacy and building the trust necessary for continental expansion. It remains one of the most underappreciated, yet crucial milestones in America's trade evolution, quietly paving the way for the next great leap in North American integration. At number 5, we arrive at the North American Free Trade Agreement, perhaps the most influential and controversial trade accord in modern American history. Enacted on January 1, 1994, NAFTA united the economies of the United States, Canada, and Mexico into a single regional bloc, representing one of the largest free trade zones ever created. Negotiated under President George H.W. Bush, ratified by a Democratic-led Congress, and implemented by President Bill Clinton, NAFTA was a rare bipartisan achievement that sought to eliminate most tariffs and trade barriers across key industries, including agriculture, textiles, and automotive manufacturing. It also established strong protections for intellectual property rights and a comprehensive dispute resolution system that reinforced transparency and cooperation. Economically, NAFTA's impact was enormous. Regional trade tripled within a decade, and integrated supply chains made North America globally competitive. Yet, its political aftermath was far more divisive. Critics blamed NAFTA for the loss of American manufacturing jobs, echoing Ross Perot's famous warning of a giant sucking sound as companies relocated to Mexico. While much of this shift was actually due to automation and competition from China, NAFTA became the symbol of globalization's discontents, sparking populist movements that would later fuel Donald Trump's tariff wars. Despite its controversies, NAFTA redefined economic cooperation, proving that regional trade could reshape entire continents and political ideologies with lasting consequences. At number 6, we feature the US-Jordan Free Trade Agreement, a pioneering pact that reimagined the purpose of trade deals for a new century. Taking effect on December 17, 2001, JAFTA became the first U.S. free trade agreement with an Arab nation and a cornerstone of post-9/11 diplomacy. While it promised the elimination of nearly all tariffs within 10 years, fully achieved by 2010, its revolutionary feature was the inclusion of binding labor and environmental standards, setting a new precedent in global trade. This innovation was a direct response to the domestic backlash against NAFTA, addressing long-standing criticisms about unchecked globalization and weak worker protections. But JAFTA's influence stretched beyond economics. It was deeply strategic, aiming to strengthen ties with Jordan, a key moderate ally in the Middle East, and to foster regional stability through economic cooperation. The deal also built upon the Qualifying Industrial Zones program, which granted duty-free U.S. access to products made in Jordan or Egypt containing Israeli inputs, a subtle yet powerful incentive for regional peace and collaboration. By blending economic liberalization with social responsibility and security goals, the US-Jordan FTA redefined trade as an instrument of diplomacy, not just profit. It proved that commerce could be harnessed to promote peace, stability, and shared values, a vision that reshaped America's approach to global trade in the 21st century. At number 7, we present the US-Singapore Free Trade Agreement, the first American trade pact of the 21st century, and a masterclass in adapting trade rules to the realities of a digital, knowledge-driven economy. Coming into effect on January 1, 2004, the SGFTA went far beyond traditional tariff reduction, though it did achieve a full duty phase-out by 2013, and instead focused on shaping the regulatory frameworks for high-tech industries, e-commerce, and intellectual property. As Singapore stood as one of the world's most advanced economies, this deal was not about opening low-cost markets, but about setting gold standards for innovation-driven trade. The SGFTA became a laboratory for pioneering provisions on cross-border data flows, digital trade, and customs modernization, all while reaffirming commitments under GATT and GATS to ensure consistency with the multilateral system. Its forward-looking structure helped define what high-standard trade agreements would look like, merging economic liberalization with technological governance. By securing strict IP protections and promoting transparency, the SGFTA positioned the United States as the rulemaker of the digital era, influencing how future trade agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership would be conceived. Strategically, it strengthened Washington's economic footprint in the Asia-Pacific, signaling that the future of global trade would be digital, data-driven, and distinctly American in design. At number 8, we turn to the Dominican Republic Central America-United States Free Trade Agreement, a bold attempt to use trade as a tool of regional development and political stability. Negotiated under President George W. Bush and implemented between 2006 and 2009, CAFTA-DR connected the U.S. with Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic, forming the first American trade pact with a bloc of developing nations. Its goal was as ambitious as it was idealistic: to promote prosperity, strengthen the rule of law, and stabilize the U.S. southern border through economic integration. The agreement immediately opened over half of U.S. agricultural exports to duty-free access, with nearly all tariffs set for elimination by 2025. Yet its political fallout was fierce. Critics warned it would accelerate job losses and weaken labor protections, echoing the same anxieties that had plagued NAFTA. Organized labor and civil rights groups denounced the deal's weak enforcement of worker rights, concerns validated when Guatemala became the subject of the first-ever labor rights dispute under a U.S. trade pact. This failure underscored a new reality. Economic gains alone could no longer justify trade liberalization. CAFTA-DR demonstrated that in the post-NAFTA era, every trade agreement needed credible social safeguards to sustain domestic legitimacy. While it expanded U.S. influence in Latin America, it also intensified the anti-globalization sentiment that would later erupt into open revolt against the free trade consensus. At number 9, we spotlight the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement, a landmark pact that symbolized America's economic pivot to Asia under the Obama administration. Effective March 15, 2012, KORES became the largest U.S. trade deal since NAFTA, eliminating 95% of tariffs within 5 years while opening new frontiers for services, finance, and intellectual property. But more than a tariff deal, KORES was a regulatory masterpiece, tackling non-tariff barriers that had long stifled market access, especially for U.S. automakers facing strict Korean standards. Negotiators worked meticulously to align safety, emissions, and testing requirements, ensuring U.S. vehicles could compete fairly in the Korean market. This focus on regulatory harmonization marked a major evolution in trade diplomacy. The new frontiers of commerce were no longer ports and customs, but rules, standards, and bureaucracies. KORES also carried strategic weight. It was a vital economic pillar supporting the U.S.-South Korea alliance amid growing regional competition from China. Its technical complexity later provided the Trump administration with the political ammunition to renegotiate the deal in 2018, citing regulatory imbalances. Despite the controversy, KORES remains a cornerstone of the U.S. presence in East Asia, blending commerce, technology, and security into a single integrated vision for 21st century power. Finally, at number 10, we conclude with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the most ambitious and politically explosive trade agreement in modern American history. Signed on February 4, 2016 by the U.S. and 11 Asia-Pacific nations, the TPP was conceived as a mega-regional pact encompassing nearly 40% of global GDP. More than just an economic deal, it was a strategic masterstroke designed to counter China's rising influence by setting the highest global standards for digital trade, labor, environment, and intellectual property, effectively writing the rulebook for 21st century globalization. Yet, despite its strategic brilliance, the TPP was politically doomed at home. Critics on both the left and right condemned it as a corporate giveaway that would undermine American jobs and wages, echoing decades of skepticism that began with NAFTA. On January 23, 2017, just days after taking office, President Donald Trump withdrew the U.S. from the agreement, fulfilling a populist promise that symbolized a dramatic reversal of 7 decades of bipartisan economic leadership. Figures like Senator John McCain warned that the move signaled U.S. retreat from the Asia-Pacific stage, ceding influence to rivals. The TPP's collapse marked the definitive end of the American free trade era, closing a 70-year chapter that began with GATT in 1947 and defined the global economic order. The story of these 10 agreements reveals a powerful truth. America built the global economy, but couldn't protect its own from the fallout. From tariff cuts to complex global standards, trade deals grew smarter but less understood, breeding distrust and division at home. By 2017, the grand era of globalization had ended, replaced by Trump's bold, nationalist reordering of trade. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful insights into history, politics, and global change. Thanks for watching.